Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here today. And thank you so much, Dean Adams, for the generous introduction and especially our anniversary greetings. Today is exactly 10 years since we were married. And what better way to celebrate than to be here to share with you all some of the things that we have benefited from for the people that we have encountered. And Dean Eisenberg, you're an absolute genius, the way you handled the program with Jane Goodall. I've been to many, many events, but few handled Jane Goodall the way you did. Really, that is quite remarkable. Dean Adams mentioned my own journey here, and yes, it's because of my wife. She was at Columbia University, and when she got this offer, now she was a little bit of a conflict, as you can imagine, and she said, what do you think, darling? I said, let's go. I can travel a little bit more. There's no problem. And since she's come here, I have to confess to you, she has blossomed. This is the Florida spirit. This is the USF environment. She is loving every moment of it here, really. And shortly thereafter, just in terms of my own journey, I was invited to an event at the Rodef Shalom Synagogue. Dr. Cass Fisher was the moderator for that event. And he says, you have to come and meet some of the people at the USF. I said, I'll be delighted to. And the rest is history. Dr. Cavendish, Dr. Ben Herut, they've all been great partners. And there's a group of young people, the students here, who I've been meeting early on, who were introduced to me through the Dr. Fisher, Dr. Ben Herut, and Dr. Cavendish. They are also here today, and you'll hear from them. But before I continue further, I think one thing that I must tell you is the subject today, responsible leadership in public life, right? I see here in front of us Doctors Frank and Carol Morsani. Thank you so much for coming. For me, I think I could stop my lecture here if we would just reflect on all that you people have done and contributed here, not only to USF, but to Tampa. I heard that you came from a very modest background in Oklahoma. And today you built this empire, you contributed generously, given of yourselves, and you continue. Today, I believe that the leaders of USF are meeting with the Board of Governors in Jacksonville, and even to the new campus, you pledged another $20 million. If I had a hat, I'd say, hats off to you, sir. Madam. Honestly, this is a true example of responsible leadership in public life. They were blessed with some things and they've given back to the community. Just remember this. My own journey begins with somebody in this picture here. In this collage, I think you people might have had some reaction seeing some of the people here. I have to apologize. If I were to start listing all the people that I would like to refer to in this category of responsible or irresponsible leadership, I could fill the whole auditorium. I'd have you here captive for the next 6 hours. But I think that you're waiting for your pizza after this, so I'll spare you that. My own journey here begins with one of the people in this picture here. This. You see he's wearing a little face mask. That is my guru. Where in my tradition, guru is like a rabbi or your priest or the person who guides you, my mentor. I came from a background of being a businessman and rather successful at a young age. Our family was a business family, but I started on my own. He was very, very well known, originally from India. He knew the major leaders, and I was like a spiritual son to him. So I benefited by meeting a lot of people, seeing up close what he would do. He's the reason that I came to the United States of America some 25 years ago. When I was growing up at your age, I never dreamt that this is where I would end up. I feel so blessed that this is the way destiny takes you. So what plans you might have today, they may fundamentally change. Be prepared for that. Dream the impossible, that is possible. That's all I'll tell you. I'll tell you just from my own journey and from my own story. Who would have imagined that a person like me, with a business family, we were a successful business family, and the Jain community predominantly is known for its business enterprise. People from India will tell you. I never thought that I would end up in this field, but it's changed my life fundamentally. And along the way, I've encountered some phenomenal mentors. Mentors are key to the success of your life. Choose a mentor early on. Grab hold onto them. Believe me, people who have been successful, they love to mentor. They love to share where they have benefited. I've seen this on campus with the two deans, with Dr. Fisher, Dr. Herud, Dr. Cavendish. And I see all across the campus here, the way people are constantly seeking out. They love to give back because, after all, why are they here? They have a fundamental commitment to the youth. So catch on to a mentor. I'll get to that in a while. The other thing, when we came here, I started to explore. I've built a vast network of experience and contacts. How could we contribute to the place where we are living? For the foreseeable future, this is where our home is going to be. We must be able to do something here. And my wife was the one nudging me early on. That she says, darling, you have to come and do something at USF. I said, sure, what? Tell me, And we continued to pursue, and I saw and explored, visited the campus many times, met many people. I saw there are some phenomenal challenges here. And I loved that. Because when I see a challenge, that to me is an opportunity. Change can occur when there are challenges. If there are no challenges, what are you going to do? So I love that. So I see lots of prospects possible here. Some of you heard the State of the Union last night, right? You heard the President mention about education and free community college for 2 years and things. You heard some of the people who are gathered there. One thing which I am always struck by, and this is where almost my beginning point really is, less than 1% of the youth go to the Ivy League institutions. Less than 1%. 99% of the people are not in the Ivy League institutions. What about them? Can they reach the levels of success which it seems that the people in Ivy Leagues can? I say yes. And I'll give you one example. I'll ask you a question, actually. Any of you. What is it that distinguishes Harvard from any other university? Anybody? Yes? Connections. Very important. Anybody else? Yes? Prestige. Okay. Anything else? There's one thing which is unique. And I want to mention this early on because of what I might be saying hereafter. Remember this. What distinguishes Harvard from other institutions is it teaches you to ask the question. Linked to this is a story. A young prince from India, a princely family, came from a royal family. He came to Harvard University. He was a brilliant boy. This he said to me personally. This is something which happened. I was sitting with him in his office. So he says, I went to Harvard. I was all full of, I think that I'm going to be a whiz kid here. I'll be very successful. I have the cat's whiskers. He said, I was really pumped up. In the first week, the professor gave them a book. They said, read this book and write an essay. Logically, right? So they all read the book, wrote the essay. And he gave it in first. He's a brilliant student, right? He wrote an extensive essay based on the book, gave it to the professor, and what did the professor do? He took one look at the essay and he threw it in the trash can. Imagine what it does to the ego of this young prince who's used to everybody dancing around him and he's used to being the man in the center of attention. He's trashed on the first week at Harvard. Why did the professor trash it? I asked you a question before, right? The professor said, if I want to know what the book says, I can read the book. I want to know what your take is on this. So he says, that changed my entire perspective. And after that, he's saying, everything I did at Harvard, he's saying, changed the entire way of my thinking and the way I operate. So remember this. Are you willing to ask the question? Are you willing to express your opinions? In my journey, I met some of the people who you may refer to as responsible leaders in public life. Each one of these people here was motivated, driven. They felt they were doing what is right. Let me begin because you mentioned the Millennium Summit. 1998, a meeting was arranged by a UN Under-Secretary General, Dr. Maurice Strong, a big environmentalist. He had been the Secretary General of the UN's Earth Summit. I knew him from that time because his wife Hannah had asked my teacher, my guru, and asked to organize a gathering of religious spiritual leaders in Rio for the UN's Earth Summit. So she knew of all that was possible. So when this meeting was arranged at the UN in 1998, it was between, you know this guy here? Who's that? Ted Turner. You know who he is? He's the founder of CNN, right? He started and revolutionized news networks. Ted Turner met the UN Secretary General, that's Kofi Annan here, and Ted Turner turns to the UN Secretary General and he says, I'm embarrassed by my government. The US government owed the UN $1.25 billion in arrears at that time. He said, I'm embarrassed by my government. He says, but Kofi, but before we do anything about that, I think that the problem with the UN is that you guys are supposed to make peace, but there's so much conflict in the world. You need to do something about it. You know, Ted Turner talks like a cowboy. He doesn't know any protocols. He won't call him Excellency or Secretary General. He just says, you guys. And he says, Kofi Annan is a very pensive, very quiet man. So Kofi Annan said, okay, Ted, what do you want me to do? That's when Ted told him that I think you need to invite the religious and spiritual leaders of the world to the United Nations and ask them to sign a commitment to peace. Not because he loved religion. He thought these are the people who are the problem. They are the cause of conflict in the world. That was his motivation. Kofi Annan is a very pensive man, but he said that day, I think that's a good idea, Ted. Maurice Strong had arranged the meeting, said, I know who can do it. That's how I was invited to be the Secretary General. But then they continued a conversation, what they began with. After that, Ted Turner did something. If you look at the big names here, big pictures here, you know these two people. You know them? Bill and Melinda Gates, right? And there's another person at the corner here, Warren Buffett. You know, the great philanthropist. But there's something which Ted Turner did which actually motivated them to do what they're doing. Ted Turner is the person who changed the notion of big giving. He was the first person to announce $1 billion grant. Nobody ever at that time with a big billion had ever thought of giving a donation of $1 billion. That's when the UN Foundation was created. Nobody talks about that with Ted Turner and what he revolutionized after that, and how it inspired people like Bill and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett. That then they had the courage and they are mobilizing people around the world to give up at least 50% of their wealth, all the billionaires of the world. And this becomes even more poignant today because just yesterday you've read in the news that 1% of the world's population controls more than 99% of the world's wealth. You be the judge. Is that fair? I don't know. Where do you want to put your money? I don't know. Perhaps you know better. If I can take the money with me when I die, it's all going to get left here. Where are you going to put it during your own lifetime? You decide. That happened. The Millennium Summit took place. It was very successful. It was successful beyond anybody's imagination. I got crucified for it. Why? You might ask. If the summit was so successful, why did I have to suffer on that? Something I will tell you about public leadership and about the United Nations. Shortly after the summit, I was called by my mentor, Maurice Strong, to his office. And he asked me this question. He says, Bawa, what is the mistake that you can make when working in the United Nations? Immediately, my antennas got clicked, and I said, Maurice, what did I do? Right. He says, no, you tell me. I said, did I bypass somebody, authority? Remember, there were a lot of undersecretary generals, a lot of senior people. He says, no. And what he said just absolutely astounded me. He said, the worst mistake you can make in the working in the UN is to succeed. I said, what? And he says, you succeeded beyond anybody's expectation. So now be prepared. Everybody is going to take a pot shot at you. Because from up there is only one way to go. Down. Great lesson that taught me. How do you carry people with you? Build the teams who can sustain you and support you. And I think the coffin was, the nail in my coffin was dug in by Ted Turner. You know what he did? He was so excited about the summit. He came to New York. We had produced a 9-minute video. It's out there on the web somewhere, I think. And he wanted a screening of it. We had a screening. He got so excited and pumped up. Senator Tim Wirth is sitting there, and an Undersecretary General of the UN is sitting there. And Senator Tim Wirth was the one who he had asked to be the president of the UN Foundation at that time. Remember, they were one of our biggest funders for the summit. Who am I, right? But Ted Turner turns to these two people. You know, they are high up in the chain. He says, listen, this is great, wonderful. We are going to form a committee to follow up on this. And Bawa, you're the president. I said, Ted, you finished me. Can Tim Wirth or the Undersecretary General tolerate that? History. Again, lessons again. But Ted did it out of all the good intentions. He felt the momentum. He saw that I could deliver on something. He tried to do it, but that's just not the way the world works, especially in bureaucracies. So since then, what I ask you to do and what I do myself is, I try and study the systems. Even here, just take USF. What are the systems? And if you want to change the system, understand the system and work with the systems. I may not always agree with the leaders. I'm not the one electing them. I'll tell you another story here. There's somebody who's not in this image. As I said, many of the people I'd like to see mentioned are not here. One of the images not here is the Dalai Lama. His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And you know that he cannot be invited to the United Nations. You know why, right? Because of China being a permanent member, and they will not tolerate having Dalai Lama, who is considered the head of the state of Tibet in exile, to be at the United Nations. I know the Dalai Lama since I was young, because he was close to my teacher. So when the summit was to take place, I was called by the Chinese ambassador, and he says, Mr. Jain, we want to assure you of our cooperation. For the first time, China will send an official delegation to the Millennium Summit of every major religious tradition from China. I didn't know they had the traditions at that time, but they do, Dean Eisenberg. I have gone and met them, and I'll tell you some stories on them sometimes. So I said, yes, Excellency. But we expect you to abide by the protocols of the United Nations. We will not tolerate the Dalai Lama being invited. Just like that. And they knew that I knew him. They said, and if you invite him, there will be no summit at the United Nations. I said, Excellency, I have to abide by the protocols. But may I get back to you? Shortly thereafter, I was in Israel. On the bank of the Tiberias, there was a small meeting. Amongst the people there was the Dalai Lama. Chief Rabbi Lau was there also. So I went to see the Dalai Lama, and I told him, I said, Your Holiness, he calls me his Jain brother. You know, Jains and Buddhists have some similarities, especially in the principles of nonviolence. I said, Your Holiness, you know, I love you. Here is an opportunity for the Millennium Summit to take place at the United Nations. I want your guidance. I think you should be there at the United Nations. So I said, but the Chinese ambassador has categorically and firmly said that if the Dalai Lama is invited, there will be no summit. So I said, you guide me. Should we go ahead with the summit or should we not go ahead with the summit? His Holiness turned to me, he caught my hand, and he said, this is a unique opportunity. Remember, never in the history of the United Nations since it was created had religious leaders ever assembled at the UN. He said, this is a unique opportunity. Summit must go ahead. I said, Your Holiness, then let's do something. Let's start a campaign. You know, remember, I am a visionary and I'm an optimist. I said, perhaps for the first time, as we come to the millennium, maybe China will agree and the Dalai Lama can come to the United Nations. So I thought. So I said, let's start a campaign. I knew all his people. I said, in this process, I will suffer because I'm the Secretary General. I'm okay with that if we can succeed in bringing you there. If you read history of this and you Google it, you'll see lots of opposition to that. And one of the people who actually called me and really tore me apart on this was Senator Jesse Helms. You might have heard him. He was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And literally, phone rang, and my phones were ringing from all over at those days. I was traveling the globe. He said, this is Senator Jesse Helms. I said, yes, Senator. What can I do? Who the hell do you think you are? I said, what did I do here? I mean, he just calls me and starts blasting me straight away. How can you have the summit without the Dalai Lama there? I said, okay. Now I understand. I said, Senator, I would love His Holiness to be there. You're the superpower of the world, a permanent 5 member with a veto. Why don't you talk to your counterparts in China? Have your ambassador Holbrooke was ambassador at the UN at that time. I said, why don't you have your ambassador speak to them? I would love to see the Dalai Lama there. Okay, remember, we have to bring him there. I would love that, Senator. Shortly thereafter, Dick Holbrooke calls me to his office. I go with one of my senior mentors, advisors, who was close to the Secretary General, head of public relations. Because this is now becoming a PR nightmare for the United Nations and everybody concerned. There are protests and all kinds of things going on. Again, I go into Dick Holbrooke's office, and those of you who know Dick Holbrooke know that he was great at conflict resolution. His way of resolving conflicts was bullying you down. He was a great bully, a big bully. I go into his office, and again, just blasts me. And I wanted to react, and the head of the PR who's with me, he was an elderly man, friend of the UN Secretary General, he held me back. David, he says, Bawa, shut up. Okay, I'll shut up. Dick Holbrooke went on. After he had seemed to be exhausted, I said, Excellency, may I speak? Yes, sure. I said, I know the Dalai Lama since I was a child. He's been very close to my teacher. I would love him to come. Let's organize a campaign that perhaps China will be influenced. I had the audacity to tell him that. He says, yes, yes. Finally, the conclusion, make a long story short because it covered a few people. He gave me his cell phone number. He embraced me. He says, whatever you want anytime, let me know. I had seemingly won him over that day. In the final analysis, China did bring a delegation to the United Nations. With the person in China, they have a state administration of religious affairs. The head of that, the Director General, is the rank of a cabinet minister. The religious leaders from China, including the Catholic bishop, first went to the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. And in preparation for the summit, they had, as they told me, 100 million people praying for the success of the summit. 100 million people. Small number for China, but nobody knew that this was the way they promoted religion or respected religion there. Changed my perspectives. And at this summit also was 4 heads of each of the major Buddhist traditions of Tibetans present in the General Assembly. They were going to read the message of the Dalai Lama, because that's what they came for. The Chinese got wind of it that a message of the Dalai Lama is to be presented to the General Assembly of the UN. I was summoned immediately by the minister. We have to have a meeting now, Mr. Secretary General, he said. I said, yes, Excellency. Now, before that, there was some history. I had been supporting them. I had made some statements. I remember one time I was in Tokyo, and at 3 in the morning, New York Times called to do an interview on this issue. And my thing was, my response was standard. I don't agree with the protocols, but I have to abide by them. Who am I? I had maintained that. So at this instance, the minister says to me, he says, a message is going to be read by the Dalai Lama in the General Assembly, and we protest, this must not be allowed. I said, I'm not aware that a message is to be read, so I said, I feigned ignorance. He produces a copy and puts it in front of me. So I sat down. I took my time intentionally. I read it once, second time, third time. And then I said, Excellency, what's wrong with this message? I see nothing political in this message. So I learned a new term that day. We agree to disagree. But they didn't finish there. Remember, they are answerable to their government, just as systems. So they went up to the Secretary General's office, Kofi Annan's office. Kofi Annan and me had a good understanding on this subject. So I was summoned up to his office. They said the same thing, and Kofi Annan also read the message. And finally, Kofi Annan told them, I'm not going to stop it. The message was read in the General Assembly of the UN. The Chinese delegation, as token, staged a protest walkout. But in the end, they all signed the same declaration. Great victory for us. I suffered though, because on the last day, as we were standing outside the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the Chinese ambassador is standing with me, the Prime Minister is arriving. There's a huge protest of Tibetans. Remember my teaching with my guru and my own learning process? And there's a huge guy comes next to me and he says, you're Bawa Jain. I said, yes, I had been in the news and I had been covered. So, you're very happy with yourself. Yeah, summit's been very successful, it's over. I could see this man was getting agitated. He said, you're the man responsible for the Dalai Lama not being invited. I said. At that point, I looked at him. He was quite big. He was ready to punch me. And believe me, one punch I would have been floored out. And the Chinese ambassador standing with me, he's now, a diplomatic incident is imminent. Right? What do you do? I thought I was strong enough also, but this guy obviously looked much stronger than me. So I looked at him. I said, is this the teaching of the Dalai Lama? Just in that moment, I don't know where that inspiration came from. But in that moment, as I said that, his hand went down and the incident finished. So Chinese appreciate that I built some bonds and friendship with them, which will go on later on. And I went on to do some things. One incident, I tell you, in terms of how people react. Let me shift to another part of the world. Shortly thereafter, I was on a mission. I was the guest of the president of Lebanon. Now, Lebanon is a unique country. Especially, remember, what the World Council of Religious Leaders engages in is religious diplomacy. We bring the world's religious leaders with the political leaders and business leaders on issues which the society is confronted with and letting them see if they can explore working together. I wanted to study the different models, so I was going around and visiting the people. I understood in Lebanon, which I never knew before, that the president of Lebanon has to be a Maronite Christian. Now, Maronites are Catholics, by the way. The patriarch of the Maronites is considered a cardinal in the Catholic Church, as a prince of the church. So I met the president, I met with the different leaders, and one of the people I wanted to meet at that time was this man here. You know him? Anybody? Yes, Sheikh Nasrallah. You know who he is? He's the head of the Hezbollah, right? You know what our government and the Western governments call them or look upon them. They are a political party in Lebanon. As I told you, that the president has to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim, the speaker a Shia Muslim, and then the rest of the parliament is divided based on the population within the country. I sat with him. It seems to be a pattern of, things which I had to get my skin thickened for. For the first 2 hours, he blasted me again. I mean, not him again, but in my sequence of having a history of being blasted by different people in authority. So he blasted me because for him, I was the United Nations sitting there, and of all the things he felt the United Nations wouldn't do. And I reasoned out systematically because I know the system well. When I left at the end, he embraced me. He says, "You're my brother." I felt, okay, this is good, at least I have access to him. Thereafter, I was in Israel. And when I was sitting there in the Prime Minister's office, it was Prime Minister Sharon at that time. God bless his soul, he's not in this collage here. And they asked me, "You went to Lebanon, who did you meet?" What do you think I would tell them? Anybody? I'd just come from Lebanon, right? What do you think I should say to them? Should I tell them I met Sheikh Nasrallah or not? Yeah, absolutely. Nothing to hide. Nothing to hide. And in any case, they know. Right? So, remember, immediately our mind goes on to, let me not say that, thinking that I may be able to wing it, get by it. Just a very, very bad mistake if you want to build trust. So I was up front. Then they asked me if I would help do some things, which I cannot share here, but you can understand of things. Look at Cass smiling on that. And I offered. Then asked me last of it, whose side are you on? Difficult question coming from me. I pondered, and very thoughtfully I said, I'm on the side of justice and on the side of nonviolence. We become dear friends since then. I've worked with every one of the governments since then. Recently, you know of all that has been happening. We'll come to that in a minute. My journey continues. Here is somebody else. You know this man? Huh? Yes. Now, who said that? Where are you from? Russia. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. Why I mention him here? There was a conference in Iran. It was called the World Congress Against Violence. And the subtitle was World Muslims Victim of Terrorism. Great title, World Muslims Victim of Terrorism. I'm highlighting this in the context of today, in the events that we are just seeing unfolded, whether in Paris or in different parts of the world. I loved the title. The first speaker was President Ahmadinejad. He was the president at that time. Following him was the Prime Minister of Iraq, Ibrahim Jafri. Third speaker was me. After me was the speaker, the representative from Hezbollah. So when I got up to speak, now this happened shortly after, if you remember the famous incident of when President Ahmadinejad was in New York at the UN General Assembly, and when he referred to our president as being at the UN, he says, yesterday the devil was here. So when I got up at the podium, I said, President Ahmadinejad, I agree with you totally in this title that world Muslims are a victim of terrorism. Because 99% of the Muslims are not the ones who are creating the incidents. It's just a small percentage. And I see that Iran wants to take leadership. I said, but leadership comes with enormous responsibility. You come to the International House of Diplomacy, the United Nations, and you say the devil was here about the President of the US. Is that diplomatic? Is that helpful in any way? I said this at the stage, and people were there, and they said, what's this guy doing here? I have nothing to be afraid of, right? So I said that to him. I said, that is not responsible. So if you want to mobilize people to work with you, then you also have to follow some protocols and see how you can treat each other with respect. He talked to me afterwards, and he says, I have to balance out with the right wing from my side and that. I said, but you can use a different language, Mr. President. Now I pointed to the Supreme Leader. All that you heard about President Ahmadinejad and all the noise that he made, one thing, mark my words, is he is not the one who decides for Iran. Ultimate decision is with the Supreme Leader, with the ulama. He decides. I sat with him, and when we go to meet him, you sit down on the floor, on a carpet. You don't sit on any chairs. And if you don't have practice sitting on the floor, my God, God bless you. It's not easy. I had not been used to it for a while, but I did. I sat there, and when I had my time alone with him, I asked him, I said, Excellency, can I ask you a question? First, he started talking about the Jains. I was impressed that he knew about the Jains. At some point, he had been in Bombay in his own life. So he knew about the Jain community. And we started talking, and I said, Excellency, I've been in different, you being mentioned as the one calling for a jihad. I said, I don't know the meaning of jihad. So I said to him, can you help me understand what's the meaning of jihad? He got very excited. I said, here goes, I've done it, so I said something. Here comes the reaction. I said, okay, no problem. But what he said there was absolutely astounded me. He says, yes, we have to launch a jihad. The real jihad is against those people who are destroying the environment, the inner and the outer. I said, may I quote you in the media? I did. Didn't get much attention. Somehow, media doesn't like to focus on this kind of news. You can follow the press and you'll see what happens. This is my own experience. I've had many such experiences with Iran and things later on also. Even recently, the recent incidents, let me just go on to that. After the terrible incidents, especially with the ISIL or ISIS, as you may be hearing in the media, do you all know that the ulama in Saudi Arabia, the World Muslim League, the highest Sunni body, they met and officially issued a statement condemning ISIL and said, this is not Islam. The Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, again, very high authority, made the same statement. Have you read it in the media? Where is the responsibility with the media? Who can hold them accountable? Let's understand that system. Let's see what we can do about that. These things are constantly happening. Another story I'll tell you. There's another man here staying with Muslims for a minute because they're constantly in the news with all that's happening. Do you know this man here? Yes. You know what is his most important title? Which precedes the title of the king, and only he can have it. He is the custodian of the two holy mosques, first. So when you address him, it is the custodian of the two holy mosques, His Majesty King Abdullah bin Aziz Al Saud. That's the official title. Every Muslim, the 1.5 billion Muslims. And by the way, Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Just Remember that. He has the title, only him. He did something extraordinary, which according to Islam was not possible. He convened the ulama, said we have to have a dialogue with the people of other faith. He got them to agree and convened a world conference and dialogue. In preparation for that, he did something remarkable. He went and visited the Vatican, the first time in history that the king of Saudi Arabia, the custodian of the two holy mosques, goes to the Vatican to meet the Pope and say we must engage in dialogue to see how we can work together. Not much in the media heard. I said at that time, this man deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. If he doesn't, not that he's yearning for it, but it's not in the interest of media to say that Islam can also be a voice of moderation and they're reaching out in authority. So problem is not with Islam itself. I think it is irresponsible to say and demonize the entire religion based on the acts of a few. Take this incident of Charlie Hebdo and the protests after that. I ask you, yes, there should be freedom of expression, I'm all for it. But is it responsible that you play with the emotions of a community and incite? I don't for one moment condone violence as a response. That's just the wrong way. It doesn't help anybody. And as you can see, violence only begets violence. And you look even worse thereafter. The Pope was, God bless him. Now this is an absolutely remarkable man. As you know, since he's taken office, he's just churned the church and churned the world. He made a statement. He says, if somebody says something against my mother, I will want to punch him in the face. He's saying it's the same way. He used that statement while in the Philippines. He said that. But it doesn't mean that you go and attack with violence. So he's saying there has to be self-restraint and responsibility in how you communicate. There has to be some rules of engagement in this. Freedom of expression is good. I'm all for it. But the other thing the Pope did, let me jump onto him. When he took office, all the priests absolutely were mad with him. You know why? He made a statement. He said 8% of the Catholic priests are pedophile. Suddenly, every parish, every priest, they got mad. They said, people could be looking on us as pedophile. But the Pope had the courage. To me, that is responsible leadership in public life. He knew there was a problem, lots of incidents around the world. He called up people on it. So perhaps they'll start to address it. He's done various other things. I tweet once in a while. I'm very, very careful on what I put out there. Very careful. I'm still not on Facebook. I have resisted that. My confessions. Why? Because anything that we put out, that becomes part of our DNA. That becomes part of our DNA. You cannot retract it. So I'm extremely careful what I put out. But about the Pope, I did say this, so I referred to him as the Green Pope. He called for climate control to be a major issue and doing something on climate control. So I called him. Not that he's done, but at least now we can hold him accountable. He's called for the statement. He said, let's get involved in this. Our president mentioned yesterday in the State of the Union, 2 degrees higher, the temperatures last year, warmer. Out of the last 15 years, every year has been a warmer year. Last year alone was 2 degrees more than the previous years. 2 degrees temperature variation. You know what that impact is going to be. Who's going to suffer? So it's a huge issue. There are business leaders doing something about this. You know this man here? Where are you? Here, this man down here. His name is Henrik Madsen. He's the CEO of DNVGL. You see these publications, your deans have them, right? He convened a group of people on climate issues. And they said, we have to take responsibility. We have to take responsibility and get people mobilized on the issues of climate control as we build up to Paris this year and the negotiations. And they produce his book. That's why I have him up here. as people who are taking responsibility and trying to mobilize people from across sectors to do something. There's other people in that category here. You know this man next to him here? This is Peter Brabeck. He's the chairman of Nestle. You know of Nestle. Nestle is perhaps one of the largest corporations. They have operations in 190 countries, more than 500 plants. I was with him. And I asked him, as I asked some people, I said, Peter, can you give me a definition for responsible leadership? His immediate reaction was, I cannot tell you what's responsible. Who am I to judge? But then he thought and he says, perhaps one way of referring to responsible leadership is making decisions out of conviction, not convenience. I like that. The second thing he said was, beyond yourself, making decisions beyond your own lifetime, not in the immediate. Thinking what's good for the future. Think. There's somebody else also in this category here. Paul Polman, CEO of Unilever. Lord Michael Hastings. He is the head of global citizenship of KPMG. They work together on mobilizing people from across sectors on sustainable development. They're doing a phenomenal amount of work. And you have to hear them speak. I go a little above this person, just in terms of current news. You know this man. He's in the news a little bit. You be the judge whether he's a responsible leader or irresponsible leader. You know of all that's happening again in the world. Go above him. You know this man? Right? There's something remarkable that he motivated. The Holocaust was a terrible tragedy, right? But look what came out of that. I think the Jewish community is the most remarkable community in the world. Look at what they have built since the Holocaust today. Look at the influence that they've been able to generate and create. A small community of less than 20 million people. Look at the influence. Look at the contribution. Look at the participation in public life. Look in our own country. There's a statistic which I often quote. You know, what is the political contributions of the Jewish community in this country? Across the aisle, more than 60%. This small community contributes more than 60% to public life, to the political parties here. Civic sense. They know that for our own existence, we must participate in public life. They've been able to galvanize and build like no other community. It's just remarkable. Somebody else up here, this man got elected recently. You know who he is? Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India. He came, I know him from about 15 years. When I was the Secretary of the Millennium Summit, he came with the then Prime Minister, who was also from his party. And I know him since that time. This man, what is unique about him is, you cannot corrupt him. Remember, India is constantly blamed of corruption. This man cannot be corrupted. Suddenly, he's got the attention of the world. He's changing the way business is done. He has the audacity actually to come to the US and say, come to India, we will give jobs to everybody in the world. We can accommodate everybody. He's doing that. There are people constantly trying to make difference in terms of responsible leadership. I could go on. Here is one person which I think I should mention here. You know him. You know what is his unique legacy to my mind? There are people across the world suddenly who feel, like Narendra Modi, who was a tea seller in his young days, became the Prime Minister. I think the greatest legacy of Barack Obama is people feel empowered that anybody can be elected at the highest office. How you judge him, you see that. But in here, I don't know what you think about this. Is our Congress being responsible? Not to my mind. This is the most divided Congress I have seen. Is that responsible? Is that what they are elected for? So those of you who want to pursue a career in public life, study the system. See what you can do to change. As you people want to get elected and go into Washington or serve the government. Here's a brilliant young girl, Malala. At age 13, she is shot. People think she'll die. She becomes a big advocate for education and the rights of the girl in Pakistan, youngest Nobel Peace Prize recipient recently. One individual from one obscure small village, look how she revolutionized the world. And she continues. I was with her in June in Oslo. And she said she came a little late. She apologized because she had to go to school. I think that's very responsible. She did not want to skip school to come to our gathering. First, she had priority. Her parents did, that she must attend school. There's somebody else here, which I'd like to refer to here. Gorbachev. His courage. There's something else he started apart from bringing down the wall and the dismantling of the Soviet Union. He started an environmental organization called the International Green Cross. And he continues to do a lot of work in the environmental sector even today. Later this year, there'll be a summit of Nobel Peace Laureates hosted by President Carter and Muhammad Yunus with Gorbachev and all the Nobel Peace Laureates in Atlanta. Maybe some youth from here, we could get you mobilized, volunteer, and go there as an experience. There are many other people I could go on mentioning. You know Elie Wiesel. I put his picture here only because look what Bernie Madoff did to him. And all the other people whose money he just absolutely squandered. But all Elie Wiesel said after that was, he should be made to write the names of every person whose money he stole in the prison walls. He's a Holocaust survivor. Same Rabbi Lau, here. Holocaust survivor. I put Tiger Woods there, next to him. You know why? He had everything going for him. Made one mistake, right? Sometimes people in positions of power think they are infallible. They make a mistake and which forever will define who they are. So, I could go on covering the rest of the people, but just let me end with Alfred Nobel here. You know what is unique about Alfred Nobel? Huh? Yes, that's absolutely right. And he created the Nobel Prizes after that. But you know why he created the Nobel Prizes? Do you know the story? Huh? Make himself look good. Actually, there's a true story to this. I'm going to wind up. I could go on forever, but let me tell you. One day he got up, picked up the newspaper. By mistake, somebody had printed his obituary. This is a true story. You can research it out. And when he read that, all that he would be remembered for, he said, oh my God, they're only going to remember me for all the things I created to destroy all of humanity. That's when he launched the Nobel Prizes. He changed the perspectives. I just want to tell you, leave you with these basic thoughts now. I could cover all these, but a few quotes that I picked up, just I said, just to, for the United Nations, they have a global compact. For them, defining leadership is the art of motivating, communicating, empowering, and convincing people to engage with the new vision of sustainable development and the necessary change that this implies. They call that responsible leadership. I love this one from President Abraham Lincoln, 1862, message to the Congress. In times like the present, which is very applicable now, men should utter nothing for which they would not willingly be responsible through time and eternity. Think of that. Winston Churchill says, the price of greatness is responsibility. President Kennedy reminded everybody at the inaugural address for Vanderbilt and the 90th anniversary that I'm going to just make it brief. He says, focus on liberty and learning, because they will be and must be the touchstones of education and of any university. But I think more appropriate in today's context is ask not what you can do for your country, but what you can do for the country, not what the country can do for you. This applies here. I turn it to you all. You should be asking the question of what you can do for USF, what you can do for Tampa, not what USF can do for you, what Tampa can give you. Each one of you can take responsibility. There's a lot of opportunity out there here. Then the part which I love about this, and this is, liberty means responsibility. That is why most men dread it. George Bernard Shaw. And I love the one from Colin Powell. He says, being responsible sometimes means pissing people off. You be the judge. The last thing, just in terms of some attributes, I think essential attributes for responsible leaderships in public life. I think each of these words that I'll mention to you, you could do a thesis on. This is where I want to go with you all. L, to my mind, 3 words come after that to me. Listen, learn, and learn to lead. E, this is the most important. Education, education, education. There is no parallel to how much you can learn. And you can learn till the last days of your life. A, ambition, awareness, action. Leaders must be willing to take action. You cannot be complacent. D, I love this, really. Dare, dream, learn to delegate. We cannot do it by ourselves. We have to have the power of delegation. E, empower, empathy, excellence. To me, I think that's the motto of the USF Honors College, excellence. That's what you're teaching people, isn't it, after all? Or resilience, be willing to be flexible, not rigid. Take risks. S is stewardship. Leaders must have the strength to suffer. Suffering will come with leadership in public life. You have to know that and be willing to suffer that. There will be times when you especially remain true to your principles that people will attack you. H, humility. One of the most humble people I met was Bill Gates. So unassuming. When I met him, you could be walking anybody and you think he's nobody. Very humble people. That is what distinguishes most great human beings. One person who I must mention, this is President Nelson Mandela. When I was going to meet him, Dean Eisenberg, in Cape Town, we were going to be presenting him the award. It was a stadium full of people. We were meeting him, and people thought we were in some VIP room, waiting to meet President Mandela. I had been told that you don't call him President Mandela, you call him Madiba, his father. We were standing under the bleachers of the stadium. One of the people with me was Stephen Rockefeller, from the Rockefeller family. And he was telling me, Bawa, please introduce me because he's been to my home for lunch. So when President Mandela is to come, I'm thinking what I'm going to say to him. Suddenly this towering man comes, he embraces me. Hey man, how are you? I was frozen, I could not speak. Now that's very difficult for me to get frozen and not be able to speak. I wasn't used to that. But President Mandela and great people like him and Mother Teresa and Martin King, you don't refer to him as Martin Luther King, if you know, you say Martin King. They know how to make people feel at ease and they become familiar immediately. They are humble to the core. They do not forget. I, integrity, inspire, imagine. Imagine where you will be in 5 years, in 10 years, 15 years. As a Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, or in the US State Department, perhaps a Surgeon General. Some of the panelists who follow, they have some aspiration. Last, P, purpose and perform. This, to my mind, are key attributes for responsible leadership in public life. And last, just because it's Martin Luther King week, the month, the Black History Month, I too have a dream. I have seen the promised land. So he said, I ask you, each one of you here, do you want to see change in the world?
Yes.
Well, very weak. If you really want to see change in the world, I think you have to have some passion with it, my friends. Are you willing to change yourselves? What will you do if you have an opportunity that we can bring you those experiences, the people that you see here, or take you to the different places? You will make a commitment and be the responsible leaders which you want to see. Like Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. Are you willing to do that? That is very weak. Come on. I know we are. If you do not have the passion, if you're not willing to stand by some of these attributes, change will not come. Be like Frank and Carol Mursani. They've given back so much to this community, this college. Great inspiration. Make your life worth it, that generations to come will remember that we have an opportunity to have the world better than what we inherited. I feel our best days are ahead of us. We can do it together. Dean Eisenberg, Dean Adams, you have my commitment. Whatever we can bring to help support that, I'm ready for that. Let's make this university one of the best in the country, if not the world. We can do that.
So let me introduce you to who's here. So with us today is Rondell White, who you probably all know. He's the vice president of the student body. Rondell. On the other end is Hiram Rios, vice president of USF Ambassadors. Why do I feel like this is some sort of competition? I don't know what's going on here. Kayla Lopez, founding member of the Dean Student Leadership Society. And Phoebe Joseph, member of the Dean Students Leadership Society as well. And as I understand it, each of you is prepared to sort of make some comments related to what Bawa was saying. Is that true? All right, well, Hiram, I think you should start.
Hi. So yesterday we were talking with Mr. Bawa Jain, and one of the things that we talked about is looking at this collage and thinking of, obviously, it would fill the room if we were to think of everyone that we thought a responsible leader. And, I was thinking to myself, and I looked through these photos and I was thinking, who would I add on this list right here? And the one person I thought of was my mother, which I see is right here. Hi, Mom. Not to be cliche or anything, but... And I remember, we're both from Puerto Rico. And I remember that when we were younger, my mom's a school teacher. She's, I think, her 25th, 26th year here, teaching kindergarten. So God bless you for that. And I remember that when we were younger, sometimes the school didn't have enough funds to paint the school or to clean like the classrooms, that kind of stuff. And I remember my mom would go in on the weekends and then would go in there in the summer and she would take care of that herself. And when we talked about responsible leadership, all I could think of is service. And I think that after 26 years and my grandmother who taught for 32 years, I think that service and that commitment to the students, the commitment to education is what is a definition of responsible leadership. Thank you.
Very good, very good.
Something that I thought was very wonderful about the collage is that many of them are very famous world leaders. And to me, I think that's great, but I also like to put a focus on people who are in our own state who are doing things that exemplify responsible leadership. And so one of them to me is former Governor Leroy Collins, who actually decided to integrate our state in our education system. And even though it was not the popular opinion at the time, he saw that that was where Florida's future was heading, and he made the difficult decision to actually choose to do that. So that's who I think exemplifies that.
Well, not to be cliche, but I personally think that Mr. Bawa Jain would be my person that exemplifies responsible leadership. While he was actually speaking, a lot of things came to mind. He's going through the different times that he was blasted, going through the different times where he stood against, protocol and things that you have to go through, the bureaucracies of life, the red tape, if you will, and the fact that he's willing to still go through it and deal with the consequences after the actual event itself, which is inspiring because
one of the things that you experience as being a leader in general, as being a student leader, as
Being a leader on many different levels in general, you come to realize that you want the best for the people in your organization, you want the best for the people that you serve, but then sometimes other people may have different opinions, and you still have to be able to deal with whatever the kickback may be. So having that confidence and that courage to deal with that kickback is inspiring, and you inspire me. So.
Very nice.
All right. For me, when I think about leader, everyone thinks responsible leadership, they think greatness, right? And so for me, I think, what does greatness look like? And a quote comes to mind by Dr. Martin Luther King that says, "Everybody can be great because anybody can serve." And I look at all these young faces in this room and those that are established, and I think all of you guys have the potential for greatness. What are you doing to transform your community? What are you doing in the lives of your peers and the lives of your school? And for me, responsibility is service, is looking outside of yourself. When I got the opportunity to go to Dominican Republic and Haiti with LAMSA last semester, it was such a humbling experience for me, because you see people that don't have soap or toothbrushes or even toilet paper. These are luxuries to them that we take for granted. And I think that through that experience, I've learned that I want to go back. I want to do medical missions with my life. And I had that experience because I had the courage to serve, to go outside of myself. And I encourage all of you guys to do the same. Thank you so much.
I have a question, and maybe it's for you guys, and maybe it's for Bawa, or maybe it's for that person sitting in the back of the room. I wonder sometimes when I look at these people about the tension between sort of having the ego and the ambition and the strength and the courage to make a difference in the world and to get up every morning and commit yourself to service to others, those sort of things. But on the other hand, that sense of humility that great leaders almost always report. When you talk to a great leader and say, "You've accomplished so much," the first thing they said is, "It wasn't me. It was my people. It was the people who came to me." So, and some of these people, you look at Bill Gates, sometimes there have been books written about him being kind of a tyrant, kind of being a very strong leader. Steve Jobs, same sort of thing. How do you think about that? The difference between, what's the role of ego and humility in all of this? And I mean, it could be you guys, it could be Bawa. I mean, is it a balance issue? What is it? What is it?
Well, I can answer.
Phoebe, you got any ideas? You've seen a lot of leaders.
I think it's personally a balance, because it's always very scary to make sure that what you're doing and the decisions that you make are the right decisions for the organization you're a part of. Right. But then it's also making the tough calls and making sure that you're leading your group or your government or state in the right way. So it's a balancing act, really.
It goes back to that idea of conviction, of leading from a place of conviction.
I would say for me, there was something that I noticed right away when Bawa Jain came on stage. He didn't start about his accomplishments or rattling off what he's done. He said, "Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for having me in your university. There's so much I want to do with you guys. I'm so excited." And I think that to be a leader, you have to put so much importance on validating others. That's so critical. I think that when somebody feels validated, there's such more of a stronger relationship and connection that you forge with that person. Yeah, it's important to definitely be confident in yourself and be able to move forward and be proud of what you've done and who you are, but there's also an attitude of graciousness that's so critical.
Okay, great, thank you. Baba, do you have any questions or comments? Yeah, very good.
No, I think these people just have it all right. One thing I will just say is that if you think you're a leader, wrong place. If people think you're a leader,
right,
then you are a leader. So you have to determine that, and ultimately, right, the fundamental attribute of a leader is to be able to serve. There was a time when people in positions of authority could not acknowledge that they did not know. With the advent of social media, thank God, in 20 years it's changed. Today, leaders have no hesitation of saying, "I don't know." Mm-hmm. It is okay not to know everything. So that is something which is unique. Mm-hmm. I think you people have to remember, one last thing I'll say on ego. I was asked by a journalist actually this question, that all these leaders you meet and you encounter, what is the single greatest challenge? My answer was one word: ego. Mm-hmm. Look what, for instance, I think it's an act of ego that Speaker Boehner and Senator McConnell, without consulting the White House, new president invited Bibi Netanyahu to come and address joint chambers of Congress. What will be the consequences of that in the future? Yes, the Republicans control both the houses, but there's a protocol established. To my mind, you can still work with the president even though you're from different parties. This is the greatest country in the world. People look up to us. So, being in a university in America, remember, is a great privilege. And people around the world aspire to be in places like you all are. And this man, Randall White, I have your permission. Happy birthday, Randall. Today is his birthday.
This is obviously a day of celebrations for everybody. I have a question for the students. So obviously you've all decided that you want to have an impact as leaders in the world. And I'm looking at this group of people, and it seems like these are leaders from the 20th century. And the 21st century is going to look very, very differently. Do you think about that? Do you think about how it's going to be different to succeed in this sort of hyper-mediated society that Bawa was talking about, globalizing society, as opposed to the kind of challenges that a Gorbachev or a Warren Buffett or somebody had? Do you think about that? Does anybody have any ideas about that? Yeah, please.
After you, sir.
Either. Don't fight.
It's okay, please.
So polite.
Well, one of the major things that I think about when I think about leadership, at least within this century, is the fact that the world is so global. Social media does connect us all. And I don't think that we have any reason to be narrow-minded anymore. You look around this room right now, and there are so many different people represented, so many different people from different cultures. You have the guy who's from Russia in the back there, and he is so knowledgeable about all these different people from different parts of the world, and that's because of the ease of access through the internet and all of this information that is available to us. So it blows my mind when people tell me things like, oh, I think that is, I use the word intrinsically wrong. When, there's nothing, in my personal opinion, obviously, I think it's terrible to tell someone that what you believe is wrong. I think it's beautiful that someone can have one belief and then I can have a fundamentally different belief. But the fact that we are leaders in this society, we should have that open-mindedness that we are serving everyone. We're not serving people who think the same way as we do. And that's something that our ancestors didn't really preach, to be honest with us, or that we do have today.
Wow.
So I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have in the 21st century is, right now inequality is one of the biggest issues that I see, not just because I study economics, but thinking, I grew up in Puerto Rico, and it's funny because moving to the U.S., one of the biggest things that I noticed was this insistence on identity, race, self-expression. And it was funny, because even after being here for 10, 11 years now, I still feel like sometimes you're like a foreigner, this kind of thing, which, it's just kind of funny how if you look at places within the continental U.S., and in 2 years will be the centennial of the Jones Act. So Puerto Rico will have been all American citizens for over 100 or almost 100 years now. And still, we still have this concept of a second-class citizenship that comes with a political system. It comes with if you look at the schools in Puerto Rico compared to the ones here in Hillsborough County, it's appalling. So I think that if the people that are going to be on this collage in 10, 20, 30 years are going to be people who can bridge the gap, who can bring access to quality education around the globe, in China, in the villages, not just in the East Coast, people who can raise the standard of living for everyone across the board. And I think using that wealth, if it's 15, 20%, whatever you were saying, to help with that, there's brilliant minds all over the world, in Tanzania, in China, in North Korea. And I think that we're limiting ourselves by, just keeping that wealth. And I'm in a long-distance relationship. One of the funniest things that my significant other told me is, he's from Norway, and he says, by being Norwegian, it's like winning the lottery. Being born in Norway, being born in that model is basically winning the lottery. So how about those people in Latin America and the people in Asia and in Africa?
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. I think you're really right. I don't, has anybody heard of Nicholas Negroponte? Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
He founded the Media Lab, and he was one of the founders of the One Laptop per Child effort throughout Africa and Asia and places like that. And he says the next wave is going to be reaching the next 10 million people who don't have access to those kind of things. So it goes with the idea of inequality. And I hear what you're saying, Rondell, and it just, it pains me to see the polarization in American public dialogue. And you're talking exactly at that, and saying, how can we get there? How can we get to a different kind of conversation where I don't have to obliterate you and try to convince you that my worldview and my beliefs are right in order to have a conversation with you, right? And that's, and shouldn't universities be able to do that as well, right? I mean, we should be a place where that can happen. Bawa, did you have anything else? Any other questions or comments for?
One thing just struck me when we were putting this collage together. I said, in 20 years, when perhaps Randall will be the Prime Minister of Trinidad,
It could happen.
as I mentioned, and we have a different collage, I would like to see some changes in here. Something is missing here. We have to do something for that.
Absolutely.
I agree.
There was a great article in the New York Times this Sunday that talked about a really comprehensive study of high-performing teams, and one of their findings was that teams with women on them tend to perform better. So there you have it. Absolutely. Well, was there anything else the panelists would like to say?
Well,
Closing comments, Phoebe?
closing comments. I think there's one specific part of Mr. Jain's lecture today that really kind of stood out to me because it's something I've believed in a while, is to identify and look at the system that you're working in. And that means, that could be what's going on at USF, and that could be what's going on in our local governments, our state government, and really be aware of what's going on. Because just because you're a student or you aren't going to be, in politics one day doesn't mean you shouldn't be aware. And if you want something to change, you need to go out there and actively search for it. So just be looking for information, be on the lookout, and just be aware of your community and what you can do.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah. Did you want to, Oh, good. They're fighting over the mic.
No, that's okay.
That's how they are.
No egocentrism here. So, I'm graduating in May, and so something that I really thought about being in USF is, okay, it's very exciting, you're done with classes, you're done with exams and all that craziness before you go to the next stage in your life. But there's a part about college that is very beautiful that's never going to happen again. And I think that beauty lies in the promise of your youth and all the things that you have ahead of you and the change that you can create. And you guys are in that place right now. I started with an organization called Project Downtown, handing sandwiches out to homeless, and that's where I realized I had a passion to serve underserved populations with medicine. You guys don't know where your passions lie until you serve in your community where you're passionate, and everybody's passion is different. Maybe mine is homeless advocacy and medicine, maybe yours is animals and the environment or education. You have to move forward, find your passion through service, and be able to accomplish your dreams with that for others.
Nice, nice. Yeah.
So this addresses more to the students who are in the room as well, and also please take this message to your friends and your families and anyone that you come into contact with, because the objective is to spread this as far as possible. You guys are the future of the USF system. You guys are the future of Tampa Bay, of Florida, of our nation, and of our world. It is important that you understand that you have a responsibility to practice responsible leadership, to be those people that leave their ego in the backseat and focus on service of others. Because at the end of the day, and to be very honest with you, and you can, as Bawa stated, with the state of our Congress and the state of everything, politics in general right now in America, is divided. And that division causes a hindrance for progress. And that is an issue, and that is a problem. And at any point in time that you are, you're not part of the solution, you're a problem. So don't be a part of the problem. Make sure that you're a part of the solution. Make sure that you're in service of others, and that your friends are in service of others, and that your family is in service of others, and that everyone is in service of others. Because once you're in service of others, someone is in service of you. And that's it.
That's lovely. And an added benefit is that psychologists have found that those who live in service of others are happier.
Yes.
Because the research shows that when you show up in your mind, that's when you tend to get unhappy and depressed. It goes back to ego. Three final things I want to say. One is that I want to let you know on February 26th at 7 o'clock at the Strauss Center, we're going to have Dr. Daniel Levitin is going to be coming. He's giving a talk called This Is Your Brain on Music, and it's about neuropsychology and how brains react to music. The second thing I want to do is I want to thank all of our panelists and Bawa Jain for being here today. Brilliant.